Welcome to another edition of the Brumakian podcast, an episodic review series where I can review anything but not everything. That includes monster movies, both big and small, anime, and video games. I'm Demetrius, and this is my review of Godzilla Final Wars. I mentioned in my last review that Godzilla's popularity in Japan has been taking a nosedive. Let me add more to that. Ever since 1989, there has almost been a Godzilla film for 15 to 20 years, meaning there was bound to be some fatigue. Sure, Gamera had his glory in the spotlight, but that was for 3 films in the span of 4 years. This was more evident when the anthology era, that's what I'm calling it, started after TriStar's adaptation. Speaking of, even though they still had distribution rights, and they still do with the current format of Blu-rays and digital releases, strangely, the rights to Godzilla expired in 2003. However, they had one more film to distribute over to the West. Knowing that His Majesty was approaching 50 years, not to mention the aforementioned decline in popularity, Toho decided it was time for the king to retire, for now, and they decided to go out in a big bang. There have been many offers to many directors, including Shusuke Kaneko, but he was too busy with another film by Toho. Ryohei Kitamura, who debuted as a director for the film Versus back in 2000, accepted the offer. One of the reasons why he accepted it was that he stated, "I love the Godzilla movies back in the 70s, but not so much the ones released in the 1980s and 90s. Godzilla movies back in the 70s were never just monster movies. There were always messages and themes that reflected the time and world within which they were made, and they combined this so well with straight-out entertainment. They lost that touch in the 1980s. To which, to be fair, he's kind of right. Many kaiju from the Showa era made the cut, like a best of album as Kitamura would describe it as. That means Godzilla had to have a redesign, since the Kyogoji suit wasn't going to cut it. In fact, the costume and suit designs in general were going to be Metal Gear as fuck. The reason why I say this is because Kitamura had a close relationship with Hideo Kojima, the creator of the Metal Gear series. Yujo Shinkawa, its designer, was added on to the project of creating new designs and attire for the kaiju and human cast respectively. Speaking of Metal Gear, in Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater for the PlayStation 2, there is an Easter egg referencing Godzilla himself. Maybe a little too obvious even for Hideo Kojima, who somehow predicted the future. "Colonel, I accidentally created a time paradox. What should I do?" Eiichi Asada was brought in from Tokyo SOS to do the effects, and Keith Emerson, Nobuhiko Morino, and Daisuke Yano were brought on as music composers, with Canadian rock band Sum 41 providing the song We're All to Blame. The end result was Godzilla Final Wars, released in Los Angeles on November 29, 2004, that is where Godzilla himself got his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, good for him, and then in Japan 6 days later. And it underperformed at the box office, making it one of the lowest grossing films in the franchise. One of the reasons was because A, the film had to compete with Disney's The Incredibles and Studio Ghibli's Howl's Moving Castle, of which Toho themselves actually distributed, nice job, and B, the reception to the film was split down the line. And before we get to my opinion, here's the film synopsis according to IMDb. When the aliens invade Earth, they release monsters to destroy the big cities. The Earth Defense Force, formed by mutants, is incapable of defeating the creatures. Commander Douglas Gordon decides to unleash Godzilla, that has been trapped for many years, to fight against the monsters. Godzilla becomes the last hope on Earth to vanquish the monsters and the powerful and brand new Monster X. Insert Goldberg theme here. If I have to describe Final Wars in a few short words, they have to be fucking ridiculous. Both good and bad. It is nice that I get to see some of these monsters back on the big screen, but all of them, with the exception of Gigan and Godzilla, get little screen time. Sure, I like it when the film is going at a breakneck pace, but the issue is that it sacrifices character growth and development. That's not to say that there aren't any downtimes. For example, when Godzilla is rampaging through a small town, the grandfather has to explain his grandson why he hates humanity, and I do like the ending when said grandson, and Minero of all fucking things, had to tell the adults to act like, well, fucking adults and forgive each other. But to get back to my point, when the film is non-stop action all the time, it becomes very hard for me to relate to these characters. Sure, I like them for what they are, but I would like them even more if they had more character. You know what I mean? Okay, I'm not knocking on Don Fry. I'm sure he's a great human being and a great boxer since I saw some of his matches, but sheesh, I can tell that acting is not one of his strong suits. And I'm pretty sure he heard this and he'll probably knock me out in the ring. And I hate to make this comparison, but with that mustache and outfit, he looks like Joseph Stalin, if he wasn't a communist and a murderer, although that last one needs a double check. Moving on to the monsters in order, Anguirus looks great, Rodan looks good, King Caesar is alright, get Kamakus and Kumonga the fuck away from me, give me a giant pool of butter for Ebera, Hedora isn't tripping balls, thank god, Mothra looks great as usual, didn't think that she would go kamikaze, Jira is utterly useless, Minera is still an annoying little shit, Gigan looks fantastic and Metal Gear as fuck, even with chainsaw hands, Monster X looks interesting as its own creature, but not as Kaiser Ghidorah, and while I'm on it, I do not like Kaiser Ghidorah's design. Ghidorah with 4 legs is just weird, and its wings are way too small. Which brings me to His Majesty himself. There is a reason why Goldberg's WCW theme Invasion played during the break. It is because Godzilla mowed any and all down like a fucking truck. And his design is, alright, it's not the worst suit I've ever seen. Speaking of suits, this will be the final time that Suitmation would be used in a major Japanese film. Sure, there will be fan projects that still uses it, but in terms of an official film by Toho, this is it. And it looks good, not much else to say about it. Well, except for Jira, which is in CG, and it looks rough. I can't say the same from the music, unfortunately. Aside from Godzilla's theme and Gigan's Awakening music, it feels out of place, too much techno for my taste. Sure, GMK had techno, but it also had, an orchestra. Godzilla Final Wars overall is a very middle-of-the-road film for me. I do like the action, but it feels empty without that much development in the characters. If it did have that, then I'd be singing a different tune. But as it stands, if I wanted to turn off my brain and just enjoy myself, I guess this film would work in that regard. As one king went off to live in the United States for his retirement, another was making his return. The monkey has returned, and he is getting an upgrade to his original film. Until then, thank you all for watching / listening. Like, comment, subscribe if you so choose to. This has been Demetrius signing off. Be well, stay safe, and have a good day. Hail to the king.